Hi, I'm Nicole Roberts-Jones, and welcome to The Fierce Files. Now, what I know for sure is that one of life's greatest gifts will meet you when you go after your more. And so here is why I share with you thought-provoking insight and behind-the-curtain conversations with women who have reached the pinnacle of success because they went after their more. Now, I really want you to get this. One idea from these episodes can make a remarkable difference, not just in your career, but in your life. And I want to make sure you join the conversation in our Facebook group. So go to findyourfiercemovement.com. Now grab your pen and get ready for today's session of The Fierce Files. All right, welcome to this episode of The Fierce Files. And today, you got to know, I'm super excited to introduce to you Sophia A Nelson. Now, Sophia is an NBC News contributor. She's an MSNBC commentator. She's an award-winning journalist, a best-selling author of not one, but 3 books. But on top of that, she's a highly sought after conference and corporate speaker for her ability to bring clarity to a host of issues, everything from women's and civil rights to what truly makes America great, which is our diversity. She's a former Congressional Committee investigative counsel. She's a high-powered corporate lobbyist and a political insider. Now, you can tell this woman has had more and more and more, right? Now, on top of that, she is dynamic, engaging, and a brave voice for our times. Welcome, Sophia.
Hi, how are you, Nicole?
Excited to have you. So super excited. And you got to know I'm bubbling with so much stuff I know we can talk to you about. But first, tell us, if we had a glimpse into you, into your life, what would you say, or how would you explain who Sophia be in like one sentence?
One sentence?
I know, right?
Wow, you stumped me right out the gate. No, in one sentence, I think the way I classify myself or explain myself is as I do, like, you know, on my Twitter feed and my Instagram, because you only get a few words, and that is really a disruptor and a change agent. Mm-hmm. And what I mean disruptor is, I think that we're living in a time right now, Nicole, where if you just look at what happened in the U.S. Open with Serena and Naomi Osaka, and the way that women are still put in boxes in terms of our behavior, the way we're not allowed to express our emotions or feelings, the way we're expected to conduct ourselves differently than men. I see myself as a woman who's helping womanhood, girls, teens, and all of the above to redefine the box, to redefine the more, to redefine what we've been told we're allowed to have and what we shouldn't be allowed to have, if that makes sense.
Ooh, that does make sense. And that's so good, because now you guys all see why she had to be our first guest. Now, listen, you know, and I'm going to be completely candid. My favorite book is The Woman Code. Now, yes, I like all 3. And I started Eplurious. I'm going to mess it up. I'm Ebonical. So Epluribus 1. But my favorite of your 3 is The Woman Code. And so there's 20 codes in her book that really are the keys to unlock your life. And so even knowing why, at least the why, according to Nicole, you wrote your book, Unlocking What Lies Inside You as a Woman, you know, for you, Sophia, so you started, you know, your career as an attorney, and you left your practice in 2008 to become a journalist, which is like, you know, who does that? Sophia Nelson, right? So what made you say yes to that first moment when you knew there was more for you to do?
Well, I think, look, you know, I wanted to be a journalist my entire life. I remember in high school sitting down with my parents, and when I was looking at colleges and deciding what I wanted to do, and I really wanted to take an ROTC scholarship, go into the Navy and be a journalist. And I remember my parents both looking at me like, are you crazy? That's not a real career. You need to be either a doctor or a lawyer. Choose one. So, of course, I like to talk. So I knew medicine wasn't going to be my thing. But like many African Americans and other people of color, your parents want you to be the first one to go to college, you know, the first one to be a professional. So I a lawyer kind of by default. Not a bad profession, not a bad choice, but not my first love. Writing was always going to be what I did. So when I saw the opportunity to exit, I was in a big firm, Holland and Knight, and I loved being there, and it was my partner year. So I had to decide to go up or out, and I chose to go out. Plus, Obama just won the primary in Iowa. It was a big upset, and it looked like he actually could win, and I had an opportunity to write, and I took it.
Well, I have to look, and I have to stop here because somebody needs to just tweet that. She had an opportunity to go up or out. And even in that moment, knowing that your parents, and I can totally attest to that because my first career working in the entertainment industry was what everybody else told Nicole what she should do or be. And I never stopped long enough to even identify what I wanted, right? So in that moment, when you had to choose to go up or out, knowing all the perception and all the things that your family put on you, what kind of conversation was that? Or what did that moment look like for you to have a conversation with your family?
Well, in the first instance, being, 17 years old, it wasn't much of a conversation. It was
right.
What you going to do, so get on with it.
Mm-hmm.
But in 2008, I was still in my 40s, I guess. Oh, I had just turned 40, in fact, and outing my age. And I was at a different place. And for those of you out there, particularly those of you, and this is important because this is a real reinvent, transform your life moment here. I had to make a decision. Was my life going to be mine, or was I going to keep living for my parents and what everybody else expected of me? And, again, partner, big law firm. If I were still at home tonight, now I'd be making seven figures, not six, but seven. And but I was miserable. I was incredibly miserable. I hated it. I loved the people I worked with, but I did not like being a lawyer. The hours were long. The money was great, but I didn't have much of a personal life or much of a life. You work 60, 70 hours a week, literally. And it's tough. And I figure if I'm going to put in that kind of time, I may as well run my own business and who I want to be, which is a journalist. And the moment that I freed myself to pursue the life course I wanted and the career path I wanted, and by the way, all along, as I had been a committee counsel and an attorney, Nicole, I was writing for the Washington Post Outlook as a writer. So I always kept my hand in what I really wanted to do by writing opinion I had been doing since college. And I wrote, and I wrote about the things I was passionate about, and I knew eventually that would lead to a book, and it did, and the rest is history. I mean, my first book, Black Woman Redefined, came out in 2011. Major publisher, big book, nominated for a Pulitzer, won Best Nonfiction Book that year. That's my first book. So my point is, when you free yourself to find your fierce, as you would say, and to pursue more, you free yourself. An amazing thing.
And I love that you said that, even in listening to you talk about that, because of course, you guys, again, I just told you my favorite book is The Woman Code, right? Favorite book of Sophia's. So thinking about your 20 codes, my favorite code, I'm sure you could probably guess it, but I won't make you, is code 4, live authentically. And the thing I love about you most is no matter where you are, whether you're on MSNBC, by the way, that's a tongue twister. That's why I slow down when I say that. Whether you're on MSNBC or whether you're on stage somewhere, you are always authentically Sophia. You don't care if you step on a toe. And I love that you called yourself a disruptor because you are that. And that's totally why I love you. But I know that being a disruptor is not always easy. So tell us a little bit about, the moment, if you've had a defining moment when you had to choose to be the disruptor and not, take the easy road.
Well, that's been my entire life. Book number 4 is in the works, and I'm not going to say anything about it other than that. I think it's the most important book that I've written. It will be the most important book that I write because it's a memoir, and it's an inspirational memoir. And if you know anything about memoirs, particularly inspirational memoirs, and you could look at Obama's Audacity of Hope or Dreams of My Father, or you could look at any number of books written by people, whether they be politicians, corporate leaders, Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, those type of books. But this one's going to be much more real and deep in terms of, frankly, the hell that I've gone through from the time I was a kid till now. I grew up in an alcoholic home. It was a very abusive home. I could have made very different choices about my life. A lot of kids that grow up in those environments. I'm a firstborn, so I'm very typical type A firstborn child who took the adversities of her life and the difficulties of her life and made a decision to choose a life of positivity and being inspirational and being the first at many things.
But I want to stop because you talk about that like that's like everybody does that. And everybody doesn't.
Everybody doesn't. But my hope is that and I think we see this a lot, like Nicole, right? Like we see this whether you're watching Oprah Super Soul Sunday or you're watching any number of things that we see in the pop culture. I think that it is Cheryl Strayed's Wild, some of these great books where people really get raw. And in my first 3 books, they've been nonfiction inspiration, but they've definitely been more like certainly Black Woman Redefined and Woman Code have been more about the nuggets of wisdom of what we as women of color, and women in general can do to live better, more fulfilling lives, right? So those are great books. But then E Pluribus is really a love letter of inspiration to America about getting back to one of our best founding principles, which is the pluribus unum, out of many one. The founding fathers, when they started this country, were racist and they were sexist. Let's just call that what it is. That's that's just real. Right. And yet they had the vision to see that the great strength of America would ultimately be our diversity. It would be our differences. It would be what we argued about and what we didn't agree on that would really hold the union of oneness together, which I think is profound. So my first 3 books were in that vein, but this 4th book is really the naked, raw, what's it been like to be me, and how can I take that and give you the things that you would have never guessed about me. The fact that I was born with a very serious congenital health issue that has plagued me from the time I was a child, with high fevers. I've almost died 4 times from high fevers and infection. And, what living with an illness like that does to you. And yet I was a track star in high school and I was class president. And, it's not a bragging thing. I made real choices to say, do your worst because I'm going to do mine. You won't take me out of here, and I'm not going to live a life being sick or debilitated or less than, and I'm not going to succumb, and I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. I'm going to choose a different course. And that's just the beginning of some of what I've dealt with being me. And so I think it is very important that we set up as women, particularly now women at middle age, which I am, I am very concerned about this next generation of young women and the way they value themselves and the things they're engaged in as late as and as early as middle school, and the lack of self-esteem and the lack of self-awareness. I think that we're in, this age of Me Too, Nicole, and this where we are now, and again, we're seeing this with what happened with Serena at the U.S. Open. We're talking back now. We're saying we're not going to take it. Right. And I want my nieces, of who we all know I adore, and I didn't have children, but my nieces are my children. And it's wanting them to live a life that is not only inspired, but a life that is rich in possibilities and opportunities. And I want them to know that they can, in fact, have it all. Right. But that there's a way to pursue it that honors yourself. Right. I want every girl to get married and have a beautiful wedding day and have all the babies she desires. But I also want her to have an amazing career and an amazing life, amazing purpose that is also uniquely her own. I think, my mother's generation, your mother's generation, and our grandmothers were defined by marriage and family. Exclusively. If they didn't have that, they were less than. And that certainly spilled over into our generation of Gen X. I get all the time, you didn't get married, you didn't want a family. Well, of course I did. Absolutely. But it didn't work out that way. So, and so you've got to be able to still live and breathe and be full of life, even when those most fundamental things don't go the way you wanted them to.
And I'm going to ask you about that because, what's interesting, and I love that I'm loving that you're being really candid, because I get that question a lot too. Well, you didn't want to have kids? I'm good. I have 2 wonderful bonus children. So number one, so many people put their own perception on us. But the thing that I hear you say, and even knowing your journey intimately as a friend, right? Knowing that, and here I go with her codes. You guys, I'm always refer to her codes because I love her book, right? Is your first code, know your value. And even what you said about the, the young women, what do you want them to honor themselves, right? So the thing about you, Sophia, and I really want to tap into this, is somehow in your journey, you have always known your value, or you fought for it, or when you forgot about it, you found it again. I want to know about that. Like, what was that moment, in your career that shaped that about you?
Well, I don't think it was a career. I think it was the extreme dysfunction of my family. And a lot of the book will be talking about my being raised as a Black female child in the 70s and 80s and really being a Gen Xer, which was really the first generation of women, and certainly women of color, who were really liberated to really pursue college, and grad school and careers. I mean, yes, baby boomer women fought for the rights, right? Baby boomer women marched for equal rights and women's rights and civil rights along with men.
Right.
But they didn't really get to realize that dream. If you go to corporate America right now, you look at Ursula Burns and a Carly Fiorina and Sam Mulcahy and some of the others who got to be corporate CEOs of Fortune 500s. I mean, Nicole in the year 2018, and we only have 32 women as CEOs of Fortune 500s, and 0 of them are women of color.
Right.
Not a one.
Right.
So
and
we haven't made progress.
Right.
If we're going 100.
And girl, and even with that, right, there's so many women, and this is really what I'm trying to get at, right?
Let me go back. Hold on, before you finish that, because I didn't finish the thought. I moved into
Go ahead.
Your question. The question was, when did I have that aha moment? And what I want people to understand, it wasn't a career thing. I didn't have a choice but to be independent. When you grow up as a child in an alcoholic home with a father who is a raging drunk and abusive and violent, and a mother who's very passive, sweetheart, but passive, and you're the firstborn, first thing you learn is, dependent, I guess, on your wiring, but for whatever reason, the wiring I got was I need to protect my siblings that are younger. That's number one. Number two, which means you lose your innocence in your childhood very early, because you move into the role of mommy because your mommy isn't mommying the way she should, or your daddying the way he should, if that makes sense.
Right.
And so many women, particularly Black women, and I'm going to park here for a second. Certainly, this applies to anybody who's a child of an alcoholic or a drug abuser, an addict, a sex abuser, whatever it is you're dealing with. Innocence is taken away very early as a child, and you're no longer a child. You become a small adult. You become a small adult. You learn how to process very quickly to be a survivor and a thriver, because you don't have a choice. And so for me, it was never a moment in my career, any of this Oprah aha stuff. It was life or death. It was survival. I went through a lot of things that I'll reveal in the book, and I'm not going to talk about them here, but there are going to be some people with like literally shock of horror on their face that me, the Sophia that they see on TV, the Sophia that they've watched grow up and have a career and do all the things that I've done and the things I am yet to do, because I do plan to run for office, and I plan to run for office in the next 6 years. It's not sooner, it's later, but it's definitely within that time frame. We've already got our eye on a seat. We already know what we want to do. We're already planning now.
Right.
But I don't talk about that until it's time. Simply want to say that one of the reasons that I'm talking about all this now, and I'm liberated to talk about it. One, I hit 50, and once you hit 50, you stop caring about a whole lot about what, and you just tell it for what it is. Secondly, you realize when you hit 50, Nicole, that you have less time ahead of you than you have behind you. Thirdly, like one of my heroes, Barack Obama, I love what he did with Dreams of My Father and The Audacity of Hope, both memoirs, and he did them because he knew he was going to run for high office, and he knew he had some stuff he needed to address, the drug use, some of those other things. Now, although I'm not going to make any revelations like that, I didn't do anything like that, there are things in my life that I think have been missteps and mistakes that I'm going to put out there before a political campaign puts them out there, because I think that's the better thing to do. And I've done that, frankly, in my other books, but people probably read them and then they just kind of brushed over them and went, oh, okay, that's good. But this will really be a real inside look into my life and how I got to where I am and to where I believe God has me headed. And it has really been just from the time of childhood, understanding that I had to be a survivor. I didn't have a choice.
Right. But I want you to get this too, Sophia. You came out thinking you didn't have a choice, but so many people and so many don't see it that way. And so it's almost like you were wired to be this fighter, this thriver, this survivor. And you and I have that in common. And we've talked about that I also have an abusive, or had, because my father's passed, an abusive father. And I didn't think of survivor or thriving. I didn't. And in my first 20s, in my 20s, I was someone that didn't know my worth, and men weren't physically abusing me because I was clear, you're not going to touch me, right? Because I grew up in that. But mental abuse, yes. And so for me, of course, I had my moment, and this episode is not about me, so I won't start talking about me. But there was something that clicked in you, something that every time you've had this, because you went from being a lawyer to then covering the White House as a journalist, to then serving as the Jet magazine first White House correspondent, right, covering the Obama White House for 2 years. Then you went to writing columns for Essence and the Washington Post and the Daily Beast, and writing books. And so it's like every moment. So it's like, when in your career, when you knew, because you could have settled for being a partner in your law firm, you could have settled for
settle, right?
Right. But you never settle. And it's like, what is that? What is that in Sophia that makes you just keep saying, okay, there's something else. Okay, I got something else to do.
Well, I think a couple things. I think, and again, this is real, and we'll probably have to have a part 2, 3, and 4 to this type of podcast. We need to do a series about this.
Right.
Because it's the kind of stuff that a lot of women, particularly as they approach midlife, you begin to start thinking of your life differently. Now you're thinking about, what's my legacy? What am I leaving behind?
Yes.
My biggest regret, obviously, is not having children. And it's not because I didn't want them or whatever. It's frankly because I couldn't have them. And again, that part of that comes from the disease I had and also the impact that had on relationships with men. Funny, a woman is defined by her fertility. And I was reminded of that cruelly yet again somewhat recently with a man I was very involved with and who adored and hoped that we were going to get married. My family loved him, and I don't doubt that he loved me, but he still wanted children.
Right. And
one of the things that's different about a male and a female is, obviously, a male can have children and theoretically until he's 80. Can't. There is a finite point for us where that, I know that Janet and all these chicks are having babies at 50, but I'm not sure of the wisdom in that.
Right.
Do you whatever works for you? But the reality is, Nicole, do you really want to be 50 years older than your baby? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, come on, when you're 70, they're 20.
Right.
So I think we allow, to the point, the reason I keep reaching for more, I think, frankly, is because there's a big hole in my life. There's a big hole where family and marriage was supposed to be, everybody that knows me will tell you two things, and I'll talk about this more in my next book, but when you get to know me, my best friends, and you're one of them, but others know two things about me intimately when they spend time with me. One, I'm Susie Homemaker. I love to cook, bake, type of things. That's my big thing. And two, I am truly an introvert more than I'm an extrovert. And I'm reading a lot of books about people who are extroverts that really, when you get around them in their personal space and their personal time, they actually don't like to talk a lot. They don't really, they're very quiet and introverted people because they don't get any off time. They're always on. And so when you know them in their personal lives, they don't want to be on. Yep. They don't want to have to talk and engage. And so I've had a number of family and friends, particularly in the last couple of years, say to me, they've told me that they're concerned because I'm very, they feel like I'm not out enough socially and doing some of the social things they would like to see me do because I'm always speaking on TV, building, doing something. And I think that's why I'm always doing something else, right? And this is both good and bad. And so I would caution women, particularly when you're younger in your 20s and your 30s, to make sure that you take time to get to know yourself. Yeah. It was something that our generation wasn't told to do. Right. We didn't really know how to do that. Oprah kind of taught us a little bit, but we didn't really know how to do that. And two, when you got junk, when you got stuff, deal with it or it will deal with you later. Get to a counselor, do group therapy, do peer counseling. It's a good thing to heal your wounds and to to become a better woman or a better man, because it'll bless everyone and everything in your life down the road.
We're going to stop here and take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back for more. Ladies, do you have your ticket to the 2018 Be the Answer 2-day intensive? Well, this is my invitation for you to join me in Boston for an event filled with other women just like you on a mission for more. Now, your more could be to get clear on how your intellectual property can and should produce your paycheck. Or maybe your more is to start your business alongside your big corporate job. Or your more could be to generate multiple streams of income in your current business, or anything in between. You need to be in the room. Log on to BeTheAnswerEvent.com to learn more and register. Now listen, it's me and you for 2 days, where I give you the step-by-step action you need to move your business into real profit right now. Be the Answer is an event where I give you the tools you need to create and sustain a business that you're passionate about, all while showing you how to generate multiple streams of income. I can't wait to see you there. And listen, you gave us so many nuggets. Now, let me tell you, I write notes while I'm interviewing, because I'm a student too, right? So she said she had a choice. I'm reviewing now, right? To go up or out. And I'm sharing this because I know some of you that are listening to this episode, you know, you're in that choice right now. Do you go up and you are, like Sophia said, she was stressed, she was burnt out, she didn't even like this job, and she knew there was something more for her if she went out. So you have a choice to go up or out, right? The other thing you shared was, and so much, I'm only going to go through a few, right? My life was either she could choose to free herself, or she could do what everybody else was wanting her to do, right? She also shared that she was a survivor, a thriver. She had, and here's the two things she said you definitely had to know. Now you're gonna have to help me because I was writing fast and I can't read my handwriting now. But number one, get to know yourself. You've got to spend time with you. And I love that about you, Sophia, that you will go away. And I've learned that. That's one of the things I've learned from you, is to go have time by myself somewhere on a weekend. Even if it's just a weekend, if it can't be a week, even a weekend away would just renew your soul, right? But really spending that time with yourself, it allows you to get to know yourself. And number two, when you have stuff, deal with it or it will deal with you, which was so powerful. Just that right there was worth the...
You can't fix what you won't face. I'm sorry. You can't.
You're right.
My favorite James Baldwin quote. You cannot fix what you will not face. And if I could go back to my 25-year-old self, my 20-year-old self, truly, and she was very... I look back at her and I wish I could go hug her, and I wish I could go hug that little girl who's being run out of her house at night and crying and getting tougher and tougher and tougher because that's the only option she's got. And just, I wish I could sit her down and hug her and love her and give her what she deserved and tell her that, look, you know, you're going to have an amazing life in many ways, but I need you to really know that you got to take care of yourself. You know, when I was 19, I did two things, 18 rather, I'm sorry. When my grandfather took me to my college campus in California, and he took me to campus the first day, I did two things. I went and we got books. And then I asked a professor named Floyd Hayes, the third, he's now retired. You know, remember Dr. Hayes from Afros? And he's now at Johns Hopkins, retired. But I met him. I happened to run into him, which is funny because we're still very close to this day. And I said, do you know where I can go to an Al-Anon meeting? And I remember him looking at me. He said, how old are you? I said, I just turned 18. And he said...
And by the way, before she finishes, those of you that are saying, what is Al-Anon? That's for family members of people that are on alcoholics or what have you. It's their own support. Sorry, I just wanted to say that. So,
and if you remember back then, we're talking in the 1980s now, that was that was kind of, the inner child healing. Remember those big movements to heal your inner child and all that? It was new, but he luckily, and this was a God move, he knew what I needed. And there is a meeting. And it's funny, I know someone who's running it, whatever, and the rest is history. But I bring to say that I understood intuitively that what went on in my house was not normal. It was not godly. It wasn't right. It wasn't anything I wanted a part of. There was no man that was ever going to be in my life that was going to act like my father, which, again, good and bad, right? Because in your effort to protect yourself, sometimes you block blessing. Right. So I think that my point is that I want to tell anybody who's grown up in some real serious mess, whether you came from the hood and everybody in your family was on drugs or dealing drugs and told you you weren't going to be nothing and told you college was for dummies and why would you do that, or whether you were being sexually abused by a relative, a neighbor, whatever it is, what horrors that happened to us. And I had horror happen to me on levels that I've never talked about, but I will. And you have to make a decision at some point. You got to decide if it's going to define you and take you out, or you're going to redirect and know that it had nothing to do with you, that it wasn't your fault, that you are loved, you're fearfully and wonderfully made, and that you got something to give this world, and that's why God let you survive it. Many people, sis, don't survive abusive homes. They end up dead. They end up on drugs themselves or alcohol. They end up on the street. Right. Many people don't survive sexual abuse. Many people don't survive violence of any kind to the spirit, the soul, the mind, or the body. So I'm lucky. I consider myself lucky to be where I am in life. And like I said, I'm just getting started. Right. I consider myself lucky because most people don't survive it. Right. And they certainly thrive beyond it. Right. They don't survive it. They don't thrive beyond it. And they don't get to do all the levels of things that you have done, Sophia. And you're so humble. You don't even realize how great the work you're doing out in the world is. So let me just say thank you. And obviously, you guys know I'm going to have her on another time because there's so much. This woman has so much, and she's giving you a commercial for her next book. So just stay tuned because I will let you guys know when her next book comes out. Hey, maybe we'll have you on the podcast when that book comes out. So with that, Sophia, at 2019, but I don't think it's going to happen until 2020 because I'm behind. I just have way too much on my plate. And there's a lot of amazing we didn't talk about, but so you can certainly, I've got a few more minutes if you wanted to ask me. I know I said that I only had a half hour, but I can go a few more minutes if there's anything else you want to ask. Sure. Well, I was going to ask you what, as we're closing out, what would you like to leave the listeners with? If there was one thing they had to know to live into your code number 5, living authentically, which I call it living into your more, because here's what I know. Most women, and let me go back to a conversation you were having a few minutes ago. So when we were talking, you were talking about how our parents' generation, and Sophia and I are the same age. She's just 1 year older than me. I'm not 50 yet, but I'm knocking on the door, right? You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. So when our parents, our mothers who didn't, they fostered their esteem through their men. They didn't have a career, many of them, right? Not all, but many. And then for us, we have a career. But here's what I know from many of the women that I have the opportunity to talk to, and why I really want to have this podcast is you may have the career you always wanted, but you hate it. You may have the career, you have the corner office, you have the title, you have the 6-figure, salary, you have the expense account, but you have this more rumbling in you. So for that woman, Sophia, for that woman that's at that place where for you had to go up or out, and it was an easy decision for you, but for so many women, it's not. What would you tell her to make the decision to move into her more? Well, I think that, again, everything starts with code number 1 in the woman code, which is know your value. And if your whole life you played the tapes that were of your childhood, and Nicole, the older I get, the more I understand 2 very important concepts. Number 1, that we get 2 lives, the one that we learn with and the one that we live with after that. That's number 1. That's good, right. The one that we learn with and the one we live with after that. That's good. That's good. I gave a commencement speech by that title in May at Philander Smith College in Little Rock, Arkansas. Under a standing ovation, people in tears coming up to me. You can watch it on my YouTube channel for those listening at Sophia Nelson. I am Sophia Nelson YouTube channel. Full speeches there. That's, by the way, the title of the new book that will be the memoir. The second thing that I think is very important that I've learned to your question is that we choose. And the older you get, the more you will recognize that your upbringing and your childhood are what you will spend the rest of your life trying to overcome, compensate for, deal with, navigate, pretend it didn't happen, deny it, whatever it is. I say that to say that I want somebody listening today to understand whatever hell has broken out against you, whatever hurt, harm, danger, whatever has happened in your life, You have to choose that will not define you, because only you can. Your mama can't do it for you. Your daddy can't do it for you. A man can't do it for you. A woman can't do it for you. No one can do it for you but you.
Right.
So it's got to come from a place inside you that simply says, I will make a choice, and I will choose that regardless of being told as a child that I was too black or too fat or my hair wasn't right or I wasn't smart enough or I was no good like my daddy or no good like my mama, whatever ugliness someone else spewed on you has nothing to do with you.
Yes.
Zero.
Right.
That's their mess, their drama. And you got to trust the inner voice, because, Nicole, all of us has an inner voice that doesn't lie.
Yep.
It's the truth. It's the soul. It's the spirit. And that inner voice whispered to me often as I laid in my bed at night, afraid as a kid, or as I ventured out and left the home to go to college or to go to law school and do all the things that no one before me did, or became the first black woman, as you know, at San Diego State University and in the entire CSU system, by the way, at the time, to ever be elected to an executive officer position. I remember people laughing at me when I ran for that office.
Right.
How are you going to win some executive office? This is the year 1988. That ain't going to happen on a majority campus like this. And I remember people laughing at me. I wasn't even on student council. Guess who won?
Hello.
I did.
Right.
There are going to be people going to laugh at me when I run for that office I'm going to run for in the near future.
Right.
It's a big one.
Right.
But guess what? I'm going to win.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, what I'm telling you is, to someone listening, I got a voice that is Sophia A Nelson. And I listen to that voice. I don't listen to naysayers. I don't listen to the people who told me what I couldn't be or who I couldn't be. I've defied every single person, Nicole, in my life who told me I wouldn't amount to anything. I wasn't smart enough. I couldn't do it. I've defied them all. And I'm going to defy them to my last breath.
I know that's
so
right.
Be defiant. Listen to that voice
defiant. Yes.
inside of you.
Yes. Be defiant and listen to that voice inside of you. Wow, Sophia, you gave us so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being transparent and for being willing to allow women into a glimpse of your journey. I appreciate you. I really do.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to the podcast.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Fierce Files. Now, I want you to walk away from these episodes with value, so grab your pen and answer either one or all three of these questions. Number one, what was your greatest takeaway? Number two, what would you do differently as a result of what you heard? So you may have heard something you've already heard before, or you may have learned something new. Either way, don't take the insight that was shared with you for granted. So commit to doing one thing different because of what you heard. Number three, what was confirmation for you? What did you hear that confirmed you're on the right path? See, I want you to take a moment and celebrate you. Too often in our journey, we focus on what we're not doing and we forget to celebrate what we are doing. So what was something that showed you that you're headed in the right direction? Now, I want you to share your answers. Share your answer to either number one, what was your greatest takeaway? Number two, what would you do different? Or number three, what was confirmation for you? And share it in our Facebook community. So go to findyourfiercemovement.com and use the hashtag FierceFiles. Now, each experience we encourage, support, and celebrate as a community. It allows us to expand in possibility and wisdom, in encouragement and love. Now, we've invited you into our community to deepen our journey with being the answer someone needs and in being committed to your next level. So until the next time, be extraordinary, be unapologetic, be bodaciously you, go and be fierce.